So the trust and alignment really is founded just on Jessica's saying on good communication skills. And we believe that you'll find that taking the time to invest in it is going to give you the foundation. It's going to help you take it further.
Okay, so I want you to raise your hands if you've ever performed an employee survey before or had one at your company before. All right, see a lot of hands up. All right, Jeanette, you're up. All right, now keep your hands up. Oh, look, some of you are doing your virtual hands. Thank you very much. So keep your hands up if one of the results of that employee survey said that communication needed to be improved. Either y'all forgot to take your hands down or you're frozen, or everybody also said communication needed to be improved. That's pretty common. That's what we see everywhere. That, and of course you need to pay me more, right?
and Noel, you'd be able to echo that in the surveys that you do.
So what we want to do is pass on some practical tips for communication strategies that we recommend you seriously consider. It's in fact what we've become known for with our clients, is that we give practical tools and tips that you can learn today and implement tomorrow. And we've identified 4 areas that we think can really help your communication. We're going to start with something that we call cascading messages. And what it simply means is having an agenda when your leadership team meets, and at the end of that, or as you go along your agenda, you record what decisions were made and what actions need to happen from each one. What we found is if you just talk through your agenda, you have the same meeting over and over again because you don't remember, did we make a decision about this or did we just discuss it? Did we say someone was going to take action on it? I don't remember who, because what happens is everyone assumes someone is going to do it, and what happens is no one ends up doing it. So we recommend that you put this decisions, discussions, and actions after every single agenda item, and at the end of the meeting, spend about 10 minutes going over it and deciding, particularly on the decisions and actions, who is going, like on decisions, who is affected by this decision. Let's say you're going to lay off some people in one particular division. Well, it of course affects that decision, but the other divisions also want to know, are going to want to know about it, because it's going to create some fear and concern in them. So you need to decide who is affected and who's going to communicate to them. What is the agreed upon message? When are we going to communicate, and how? Now, I'm not going deep into any of these today because we have just 30 minutes to share everything, but we will go deeper in future videos and we will share them to our Facebook group for you.
But this is such a great strategy, and it's only about 5 or 10 minutes that you put at the end of each regular meeting that you're having. And we've seen such great results, and it's so simple. Just take a couple of minutes to go around the room perhaps and make sure that everybody is on the same page. And one of the questions that we got was from Nicole Pletka, and so glad that you're here. And your question was about, or you wasn't a question, more of an observation. When people say yes in a meeting, but when they leave, they're not in agreement, and they may discuss it in the hallway, or they may change the decision without everybody being on the same page in a private hallway conversation. And so we were thinking this might be a strategy, but we've also thought, some other things you could do in the meeting is go around and poll everybody at the end before you leave. Just get the question out there. Make sure that everybody, all the quiet people, all the people in the room are saying thumbs up. Yeah, this is something that we would do.
Yeah, and really watching body language too. And some of you all may have some other to answer Nicole's question, but I like to also watch body language. And if they're sitting there, like this, that kind of tells me they might not really be in agreement. Or if they're introverts and they've not really shared, I might say, hey, Jeanette, you've been kind of quiet. Is there something, do you have some thoughts on this? I really value your opinion. What is your thought? What are your thoughts? And so that's another really good tip, to make sure they don't walk out and complain to others that they don't agree with the decision that was made.
Yeah, exactly.
Do y'all have anything you would want to suggest to Nicole for this one? You can feel free to put it in the chat if you think of it as we move on.
I mean, just from me, Nicole, with one question. I mean, I find it most common if the meetings are too big, like if you have too many people in the meeting, so it would take too much time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's
like pockets people.
Yeah, and you don't always have the optimal size of a meeting. Really, a working group, 6 to 8 people is usually optimal. And when it starts sneaking up, it's hard to get everybody. So another device you can do is send a follow-up email. You might want to gain agreement before you do it. Hey, you guys okay if I send a follow-up email, or get the facilitator, if you have one, to do that.
And even creating a culture that once a decision is made, we are going to support the decisions that are made.
Yeah.
If you can have that as a corporate culture, a non-negotiable that you agree on, then that can help stop that. And then when you experience someone doing it, you can redirect them and you can say, I know you may have misgivings, but unfortunately, this is the decision that was made and I really need you to be on board.
I'm going to talk a minute when we get to the data part
about that.
Yeah, because I think we can bring it up there and talk about how we've used that.
Our next tip beyond cascading messages is another strategy that we like to call knowing and being known. And because often we're so busy thinking about what are we going to say and not listening to someone else, or not knowing exactly how to communicate effectively with someone in their preferred mode. Now we use, because we're both Myers-Briggs type indicator certified, we use the MBTI as a common language with the leaders that we typically work with. But Priscilla is also DISC certified. Are you, any of you all familiar with Myers-Briggs? By show of hands again.
Show of hands. Good.
Okay. Yeah, almost all of you. Ken, I didn't see your hand go up.
It's Megan's virtual hand.
All right. Okay, you are. Okay.
Good.
Just missed it. All right. So most of you are familiar with this. So one of the things that we do is
we'll talk a little bit about it in general terms, because some of you did not raise your hand. These are the 4 dichotomies of the Myers-Briggs. It's a common language, whatever language you use within your organization. It's just a way of knowing, and of knowing how other people, how everybody communicates, and knowing yourself. And so starting with extroversion and introversion, it's the one that's the most common. It's the one that everybody recognizes. It's pretty easy to see, we think. But in truth, whether you're extroverted or introverted is where you get your energy. For example, somebody may be a complete introvert, but they've learned how to extrovert with other people, because we all do both and we need to. It's a balance. When you observe them, you may think that they're extroverted, but in fact, they need that time to recharge. And when you know somebody's introverted and you're dealing with a group of people, you'll be more respectful as you're communicating with them. Like Alishka and I are extroverted and we like to talk out loud. We don't even know what we're thinking till we start talking. And so it kind of drives the introverts crazy. But it's a way of understanding that we just communicate a little bit differently.
And if you know you're working with an introvert, you need to send them material to look at before your meeting, and then be prepared in the meeting to only just say, do you have any questions about what I sent? And not go over the entire, report with them again. They've already read it. They've studied it. They know exactly what's in it. The extrovert, you want to go over it because they got the email and they didn't pay any attention to it.
Even though you wish they had. And then the sensing intuition is how we take in information. So the sensor takes in data, facts, experiential information. Intuitors take in connections, take in the broader brushstrokes. Alishka and I are both intuitors. And so the details are something we may not, it's not that we're not paying attention, it's just that we might not immediately see it.
Right.
And if you talk to us in terms of data, we're going to always be looking for the connections.
Right. That's right. And when you also know how people come to make decisions, you know how to communicate with them better. If you're talking to someone that's a thinker, then they're going to want to know more of the rational, the data, and the facts to come to a decision. If you're talking to someone that's a feeler, it doesn't mean they're emotional and they're driven by emotions. It means that they prioritize values and people. And so they want to know, how does it affect the people? And does it conflict with our organizational values or my personal values? And then the judgers and perceivers. This one's often misunderstood, and people think that it's about a judger is like someone who judges you and, is a gossip and that sort of thing. And that's not it at all. A judger is, the reason why I use the gavel is, a judger is someone who likes to come to a conclusion and say, we decided this is the decision, this is the way we're going, let's go. And then perceivers, though, they like to do that, but then they like to talk to somebody else and get more information, or do some research and get more information before, and keep reopening it until they're convinced that they are going the right direction.
So when you're dealing with perceivers on your team, one thing you have to be aware of is that time is a little bit different. Their time is more open as they're gathering more information, and they might not be ready to make a final decision. So understanding where people are helps you to get the best work out of them.
Absolutely. So I'm going to give you a quarter of this resource, and you'll get the rest of it in the Facebook group after. This is something that we developed to show you how you can use this tool to help you with your teammates at work. So I'm an ENFP, so that's along the bottom. And Tracy, you're gonna laugh at this one. So about 12 years ago, Tracy and I were in our master's program at Seton Hall, and I was married, working full time, had 2 kids, and going to grad school. And I had my midterm paper due Sunday at midnight. Friday night, my husband found me on the edge of my bed, or on the edge of our bathtub, holding the back of my neck. And he's like, "What's wrong? Don't you have a paper to work on?" "Yes, but I think I'm dying of cancer." And he's like, "What?" I'm like, "I have this big bump. It's been growing for days, and it's been hurting me. And I think I'm dying of cancer. I need to go to the doctor." Well, he knew me, and he knew that in my dominant, at my best, I am, what it shows here. I am always pursuing things optimistically. I have this uncanny ability to see trends, and I'm focused on the big picture. But when I'm overcommitted and tired and having to attend to details, like, doing my citations on a master's paper, and or if my values and principles are violated, I turn here to the inferior, is what it's called in Myers-Briggs, or I get in the grip. And so that's when people say they're just not acting like themselves. Well, I was not acting like myself. I was convinced I was dying of cancer. And so I was focused on physical symptoms, and I was stuck there, and I could not work on my paper. So he knew me well enough to where he went here to using thinking and feeling to lend perspective. And he said, "You may very well be dying of cancer, but you're not dying this weekend. Your paper is due Sunday. I suggest you write it. Monday, we'll call a doctor and see what's going on." That's what we did. It bumped me out of it, got me going again. Monday, I called the doctor, got in, and he said, "Baby girl, you're not dying of cancer. You got a tension headache. You got anything going on in your life that's stressing you?" So this is what happens when you know the people you're working with. When you say they're just not acting like themselves, this resource helps give you some tips on how you can help them.
And it's also a way to, if you notice that there is friction that's occurring between team members and you can't quite put your finger on it, and you're not getting the best out of somebody, we really recommend using this tool, and we'll make this available on the Facebook page. We'll have all of the types represented there.
Absolutely. Now, the next tip we wanted to give you goes a little deeper, and it's along the same lines. Let's say we have a blind spot, something that, other people are like, "Man," they're around the coffee pot and they're like, "Man, Alishka just doesn't get it." What's the it you don't get? Well, the best gift you can have is knowing that it you don't get and asking people for feedback. So what we do is we've developed a 360 tool that we customize for each client we work with, where they're self-critiquing themselves. They're having their supervisor critique them. And it's based on the values and behaviors that are important at their company. Their peers, 2 or 3 peers, grade them. And then their 2 or 3 direct reports. And what we do is this allows you to have both qualitative and quantitative data, because we ask them for examples on each and every question, and we turn it into a scale of 1 to 5. And so, for instance, let's say, look at how this visualization can help, in this case, Lisa, know how she rates. On question 5, it was how does Lisa exhibit vulnerability and openness and transparency? Well, she thinks she's doing pretty poorly. She gave herself a 2. But look, everyone else was in the 4 range. So that can tell her, like, you're a little hard on yourself. You're doing a really good job. Your direct reports think you're rocking on this. Your supervisor thinks you're doing good. You could do better being vulnerable and transparent with your coworkers, but you're doing much better than you think.
So the really cool thing when we use this is that we can help lead use this as a development tool through executive coaching, looking at this over time, and they can work on these aspects. We always tie it back to culture. We tie it back to the alignment that they say is important. So for example, when we were talking with Nicole earlier about if you have a standard that you've all agreed on, that we're going to always support decisions that are made, or after we've worked through it, this could be one of the areas in which you rate, just to see, okay, how are we doing on that?
We particularly look for when there's like a 2-point gap or not. Like if this one was a 5 and the self thought, well, I'm really good at owning my mistakes, but everyone else was around a 3, that is definitely a blind spot. People would be saying, no, you don't own your mistakes. And they'd be giving you data and feedback, and you can learn, you can decide if this is something I want to get better at, because it is a priority at our company.
Right. And it helps you develop emotional intelligence, but it creates a framework of behaviors that you're managing too.
Now, Ken, I think you mentioned in your communication question when you registered that communication could really make a difference in your organization, because it seems to be something that needs to be improved. Do you think a tool like this could help? Yes. Okay. I can't hear you, but I see you going, yes, yes. Great. All right. And so lastly, we wanted to make sure that we give you this other tip, because you certainly cannot be aligned if the people on your team are not trusting of other teammates, and if you're mired in your own story and assumptions, or creating false harmony by not addressing conflict at all. So we have this 5-step process for building healthy conflict. And it's pretty simple. It starts with first in your own head, dispelling the concerns and fears that you have that would prevent you from bringing up the conflict, and having that, sitting in false harmony. You don't have to be afraid that you're going to hurt someone, or how they're going to react. If you follow these steps, your conflict should be much more healthy and peaceful. So dispel those concerns and start by sharing the undisputed truth that you both share. So for instance, if there was a communication, is everything okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's a communication or a customer service issue that you've noticed with a teammate, you might start with saying, I know that you care about customer service. You're the one that taught me customer service, everything I know. And I know it's something that we both hold dear. Then you go to state the facts. Lately, though, I've noticed you've been really slow in response. And when you do respond, you seem a little short and maybe even aggravated. The story I've been telling myself, I've already moved to the 4th step, is that maybe you're mad at me, or maybe you don't like working here anymore, because I don't know what else to think. But instead of assuming that, I wanted to ask you, what is going on? And is there anything I can do to help? And then listen. And if you go through those steps, you're not accusing, you're not saying, hey, you've been rude. What's going on with you? That could be a very different conversation. So then if you listen, you'll find it'll go much better.
And we find that listening is the secret sauce when it comes to diffusing conflict, because people want to be heard, going back to being known and feeling that you're understood. That's so important. And so with each one of these steps, we recommend that you have the opportunity to listen deeply, set yourself aside, state your position, but then listen to the other person. And you'll find that diffuses conflict better than anything. Our little brain, our big brains, have a little section called the amygdala. And when we experience stress that triggers us, we'll either fight or flight. The fight or flight syndrome is stimulated for all of us. And so what we want to avoid is when somebody gets angry, that we don't rise up and get angry right with them, because that's often our initial response, but that we step back. We use a framework or a series of steps that helps us, and then we listen deeply.
Yeah, and Nicole said she finds the time of day is really important for these conversations. And that can be true.
Absolutely.
If they're angry, if they're tired, if they're hungry, it might not be a great time for it too.
Being tired makes a big difference. I remember my mom used to say that when we were kids, okay, how much sleep did you get? Because everybody has a need to be rested and not in a good place. And I love how Lishka says, if they're not acting like themselves, that's when you want to think, okay, there could be more going on here. rather than jumping to conclusions and making an assumption, which we tend to do.
Absolutely. So we've done a lot of talking and we tried to pull you in when we could, but you may have looming questions that you've been burning to ask. And so go ahead and now's a good time for you to do that.
And you can put it in the chat.
And Shauna, we wanted to ask you here. We noticed that you said that you had worked with a team where conflict avoidance was the norm. Do you think that using these steps, if you could train your leaders to use these steps, it might help? Did we lose Shauna? We may have lost Shauna. She was on her phone. Looks like we did.
So I will speak to this one just really briefly. One of the things that we find is that more often than not, leaders avoid conflict because of all the reasons that Alishka mentioned. It's messy, it's difficult, you lose control. But what ends up happening is you lose trust really quickly when you avoid dealing with situations and issues that you know need to be dealt with. So this again goes back to open communication. Whenever you can communicate to people, to the body that you're managing or leading, you should be as open and transparent as you can, because in absence of information, people will make stuff up. You want to take control of the narrative, just like in PR, just like in media. You take control of the story that's being told, and you have the power to do that.
Now, Nicole, I see that you ask how frequently one-on-one should be held with each staff member. What are some thoughts that you all have for that one?
Feel free to unmute yourself and jump on in. Okay.
Well, I have mine once a week with each member of my team, and we just kind of touch on whatever has developed during the past week and any items that I have for them.
So once a week works for you, Troy?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, I've seen it done both on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis. And I think it largely depends on, if you remember the whole leadership strategy of whether you direct or you're coaching, it partly depends on the person. If you're in a very directive mode where they need you a whole lot, you may need to be on a monthly schedule with that person. But if you're more of just they're having free reign and they come to you for advice here and there, and it might be more of a monthly.
But making sure you set aside that scheduled time doesn't make the assumption that because you're talking every day that they're bringing things up. Mm-hmm. They want to know that they've got a space where, okay, now it's your turn. And as the leader of a group, you want to keep in mind that when you're speaking, people are going to step back and listen. And we don't think that. We assume that everybody's, just like we are. And Tracy, you had a question. Another consideration you said is, should you raise an issue that you know you cannot affect or have control over an outcome? It's a good question. If you want to elaborate on that, you feel free to unmute yourself and tell us more about what you're thinking. And I'm
Sure.
going to ask.
I would say, I know with my team, one of the things that I've said is everything is on the table, as long as we're talking about things in a productive, respectful manner. And I have a once a week team meeting. I talk to the folks on my team all the time. This is our busiest time of the year for our industry. And I also set aside 30 minutes once a month, but that time is really meant to be reserved for things like professional development and, whatever the agenda is that they want to talk about. And, but one of the things that I've had to do recently with, for example, my organization is just starting to bring people back to work. So after a couple of years of people being remote and people setting up their lives to, pick their kids up from school and take their kids to soccer practice. And, it's not something you can just flip a switch. And it's been challenging. I mean, I've raised the issues, but I've also said, hey, Alishka, you said it earlier, this is an organizational mandate. We work in a large organization, and what I've tried to balance is saying, I'm here to help you figure it out. I'm here to help you, figure out how to structure your schedule, but I can't do anything about it. I can't tell you that you don't need to go into the office. And
Right.
So, I think sometimes from a trust and leadership standpoint, it's balancing how much as a leader do I want to be obviously supporting my organization and what we're being asked to do, but how much do I also want to say, hey, appreciate and recognize this is hard and difficult, and it puts a lot of strain on, folks that may already be strained, just with workload and personal life and everything else. So
Sounds like you're doing a great job with that. That's a balancing act, and it's a hard one to do. Yeah.
it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if anyone else on the call has been going through the same thing. It's just, I think there's so much evolution. I think people are weary.
Does anybody
And
else?
I think that adds a whole other dimension to these kinds of just sort of trust and transparency. And, we recently had an employee survey, and one of the really important questions that was being asked is, do I feel I have input into decisions that affect me and my job? And, that was something that overall, like our broader department scored sort of modestly, but my team, we actually scored, I think, really well. And that was something that at least I shared with my team. And I said, I want all of us to feel good about the fact that, we do have like an open forum for conversation on sometimes what are hard issues, and how do you guys feel about that? So I don't know. I'm just curious if other people are having those same kind of conversations.
Jump in. I mean, I think people should absolutely ask about and challenge the things that they don't feel they have any control over. And, as their leader or their manager, you may have insight into the rationale behind that corporate decision that they don't have. And so even if they don't agree with it, or even if you don't agree with it, at least you can help them understand how it came to be. And sometimes that can help. And if you find out all your staff are super against this, then I do think it can be important and part of your job as a leader to bring it up as high as you can. At least make it known, even if it's not going to change anytime soon.
Very wise, Nicole.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's part of the responsibility.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to add, and I don't know if you remember this from the panel that we did before, one person brought up, and I found very effective, is making sure you ask people what they like about their job and what's going really well about their job.
Yes, that was Lisa Jammer. I don't think Lisa made the call today. Yeah. I love that.
Because I honestly, we ask these surveys and talk to our people so much about are you okay? Are you okay? Is everything all right? What can we do better? What needs to change? But sometimes the things that people really enjoy about their job are things you didn't even necessarily realize you were doing. And it can be really important to pass that along to other managers and other leaders and make sure those things get highlighted.
That's an appreciative inquiry, tip. And so appreciative inquiry, if you haven't studied it, it's something I really recommend you read up on. And it's really shining a spotlight on what works well and working from, that standpoint, rather than what do we need to change, what do we need to fix, but what's working well, what do you like about this? And so I love that you reminded us of that. Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we forget about that, right? We get mired in all the things that aren't working. And part of taking control over the narrative, part of getting that information out there, helping people remember that there are good things and that we're in it. Again, getting back to the values, what are the things that are important? Why are we here? Helping people refocus their energy and their purpose helps them to be more motivated and be more bought in. Also, giving people a chance to weigh in when they can, and there's going to be times when they can't. So giving them an opportunity to weigh in. And that's, straight out of Lencioni's. I think it looked the advantage, because it's so true that a healthy organization you get more traction when people have a chance to weigh in on what's going on, because they're going to be not only more likely to understand it and understand why you're doing what you're doing, they're going to feel heard, and then they're going to be more likely to implement it. Even if you don't have to agree with what everybody's saying, you can always tell them, that's a great idea. I wish we could do that. We're not because of this. So again, you're going back to transparency and openness in your dialogue.
That's right. Any other burning questions before we move on?
I see that Noel off, and his organization, the University of Texas, does the survey of employee engagement. So if you're ever interested in doing employee engagement, especially if you work in the public sector, he's a great one to reach out to. So I'm glad that he was able to join us.
So we've talked today a lot about building a balanced culture, and we wanted to go over the 4-step process and how you can partner with one another and with us to getting things done.
So we talked about strategic alignment, and that's getting everybody on the same page. And if you remember from, I know Brian went through the Malcolm Baldrige criteria. This really is where you start at the very beginning. Getting everybody on the same page from the top to the bottom. It's critical to getting results. The second one is getting leaders focused together as a team. As Lencioni called it, the first team. They get together, create the team that's going to drive through the organization. And then you have systems in place, systems for tasks, systems for automation, systems for reinforcing behaviors with
Hiring,
people.
firing, recruiting, retaining.
Performance evaluations, all of it needs to be together and aligned. And that's how you get to the results.
That's right. And we see BCC, or building a balanced culture, as the gear that kind of drives all of that. So we want to create this group of leaders like you where we can help support one another. And Priscilla and I have already started it for us. We've created this Facebook group called Building a Balanced Culture. You'll be the first people that we invite. And it's just a place for leaders to nerd out and give generously to one another as peers. And so we'll be on there, monitoring and helping to give advice and help support one another. We'll be sharing this video so that you can get this afterwards if you want to refer to anything, or for those who were unable to attend. And we'll also be sharing insights, the resources that I shared with you earlier, that in the grip, I'll share all 4 slides of that, and other insights that we've written on the very topic that we covered today. And then we'll share more as we continue the leadership series.
So as we begin to share stuff, in the grips, as she mentioned, we'll build that out for all 4, all of the types, all 4 pages that go into that, articles that we've written, videos that we'll be creating. We want to create the community, as Alishka mentioned. The next the webinar that we have in December on the 2nd is going to build on what we've talked about with creating trust and alignment. Then you need to make sure that everybody is focused on the goals and what the strategies are to keep people from getting overwhelmed. Bringing that leadership team together, bringing the people on the team together to begin to create their goals in a way that's collaborative and it's understood on results.
So save the date, but we'll also send you an invite as we did this time, and we'll hope to see you then. Now, we will stay on for a few minutes if anybody wants to continue to chat, but we want to respect everybody's lunch hour and let those of you go if you need to go ahead and go.
And any other questions, any chance to visit? And again, you can email us directly if we didn't answer something, or if you just want to talk something through, we're available. We're more than happy to spend time with you, just talking about an issue that you need to talk about and figure out if there's a solution that we've got that we can pass on, and connect with one another as well.
You can find our group on Facebook. It's called Building a Balanced Culture. We'll also send the link in our follow-up email when we get the video download, and we'll let you know that it's there. Thanks for coming, you guys.
Great to see you. I'm so glad you came, Hannah.
Tracy, it's so good to see you. Oh, she left.
Thank y'all so much.
Oh, thanks, Reagan.
Yeah, feel free to.
Thank you, Alishka. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great seeing you guys.
Just so nice to see everybody. It's just a great community, such a great group of people too. And I've missed seeing everybody. So it's
Michelle
so nice.
was here. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Michelle.
Oh, good, Michelle.
Mhm.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks. Really
Thanks.
Stuff. Really
Great.
appreciate it.
Troy.
information.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll be in touch.
See you
Hope to
online.
Thanks, guys.
Doing this.
Hey, Ken, good to see you again. Tell your
Same
wife
here.
I said
Thanks.
hello.
Will do.
Okay.
And Lizzie, I'll be sending you the slide deck if you want to forward it to the guys on the team that couldn't make it. And again, I am available
Awesome.
anytime if you want to talk, or if anybody wants to talk through some issues that you're having.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm glad to make the associations, and really glad to meet you. And so I would definitely be reaching out because I've got a couple ideas I'd like to pick on.
Wonderful. That'd be great. Good. Nice to meet you.
All right. Nice to meet y'all as well. Thanks so much.
Welcome. Bye, Lizzie.